Hello and welcome to Smash Writing. As you can tell, I'm testing out a new mic, so hopefully there's no more ticking sound in the back. I didn't know that was happening until recently. I'm so sorry for that. But as you can tell, see from the name of the video, we are continuing down the Hellraiser path with Hellraiser Inferno. I'm really nervous going into this one. I know at some point, like I said, the drop-off is coming. Hellraiser 4 felt real shaky. Let's see what Inferno has to offer, shall we? But we meet a guy named Joseph. He's a homicide detective who really likes puzzles and has a bit of a drug problem. He gets called into a crime scene where the victim, he actually went to school. We met his partner named Tony, and the victim was someone he bullied at school back when he was in high school. We see him stealing drugs and finding the box, the limit configuration, with a candle on top with a child's finger inside of the candle. But he takes it back and he tries to get fingerprints, but the guy's like, it's going to take me tomorrow, hopefully we'll run it then. And he goes home, he meets his wife and his daughter, and he's out the door almost immediately, saying he needs to go work a case, but he's really going to pick up a sex worker. After they've done their thing, and he's laying in the bed, he gets up and he actually solves the box. And he hits the ground and bright light, and he goes back into the room, but he's no longer in the dive hotel. He's in a random bedroom. And he follows screaming out, and we start meeting the Cenobites. We have these two female Cenobites who kind of seduce him, and he is all into it, despite the fact they're putting their hands inside of his chest. And he probably snaps himself out of it. And we meet what I keep calling the Wish.com Cenobite. He is the Wish.com Chatterbox. He is sliced from here, and he's just this half torso in his head, and that's about it. But he jumps over the stairwell, he goes around the door, and we see a glimpse of the High Priest. Until this point, I've been calling him Pinhead like a fucking idiot. I knew his name was the High Priest, and I kept calling him Pinhead. Anyway, I'll do my best to call him the High Priest from now on. We see a glimpse of the High Priest, and he wakes up on the floor of the hotel. Daphne, the sex worker, is asleep in the bed, so he goes about his day, he goes to work. And he gets a call from Daphne, who's screaming for help, and we get to hear her being eliminated over the phone. Him and his partner Tony rush to the hotel room, where he finds the body hanging in the shower. And he guilts Tony for being his partner and everything to help him clean the crime scene, so there's no sign of Joseph having been there. But while he's doing all that, he plants evidence to frame Tony. But they also find another finger in the shower, suggesting this has something to do with the murder from the night before. So he comes up with an idea, and he goes to the CI guy who's running the fingerprint and has him narrow it down, and that leads him to a body piercing guy who tells him about the engineer, and he's the first person to say the lines, "If you hunt the engineer will hunt you." This takes him to his former snitch, who I'll call the pervy ice cream man. Probably shouldn't be allowed to drive that ice cream truck. And he tells him the story of a guy named Terry who crossed the engineer by marrying a woman he was told not to. And the woman ended up disappearing, and Terry continuously got body parts of her until her head came. It's really messed up Terry. So Joseph tells the ice cream man he wants to meet with Terry, and he goes off. He meets up with Tony, and Tony's starting to get nervous because Tony's a good cop. He wants to do good by his work and do good by his family, and he wants his family to be proud of him. And he wants him and Joseph to go tell the captain what they did at that hotel room. And Joseph counters by telling him about all the evidence he planted, and he could either help him, in which case he'll tell the captain that it was an honest accident that all that stuff got left there, or he'll tell the captain that Tony pulled him in and tried to make him clean the scene and everything, and then have Tony being on the hook for Daphne's death. This obviously does not sit well with Tony, but there's not much he can do about it. Joseph gets a video of videotape. He puts it in, and he sees the illumination of the ice cream man and a finger being deposited in the cash register. But when he takes the footage into the Captain Tony and CSI guy, forensic guy, the footage is gone, erased. There's nothing to be seen. Captain, worrying about his mental state, tells him to go see the shrink, and he sends Tony to go pick up Leon, the body piercist, in the shrink's office. Oh, he goes to the shrink's office and he gets a delay. He'll pick up tomorrow. They actually find the ice cream man, and everything is the way he claims he saw on the videotape, but Tony's a bit suspicious of this. But there's a voicemail on there from Terry sending him to this other guy at a bar. He gets there and he meets the guy, and they go back and forth on their threats, and the guy saying the engineer wants you to play his game. But while that's happening, we see the Cenobite that he's been hallucinating with no face. There's this tight skin mask over the top of his face. And he gives chase, and he ends up losing him and gets his ass kicked by these two cowgirl women. And the guy he was there to meet with tells him, I'm pretty sure finding that child is the game you're playing. And Tony comes over, and the three disappear, and Tony helps him into the car. And Joseph demands to be taken back to the station where he meets the shrink. And he tells him that he'd heard of the engineer once when he was a rookie, and he just thought it was an urban legend. And the shrink has heard of him too. There was a former cop who was working the case that was investigating the engineer, and he had the box too, and the guy ended up eliminating himself. And Joseph shows him that he has the box, and that's where the shrink tells him about the limit configuration. And the one thing he doesn't understand with, when you open the box, they're supposed to come and take you. Why didn't they take Joseph? So he gets a bit of paranoia, and he ends up rushing home to check on his family. He falls asleep for a moment before being waken up by a phone call that his mom has had a visit from the guy named the engineer looking for him. And he rushes off to go see what's going on, and his mom and his dad are at this nursing home facility. And they're okay, but there's a green light coming from the other room, so he goes to investigate, where he gets locked in, and he hears his parents being knocked off. And he jumps awake, and he's back in bed, and the phone goes off, and it's the exact same phone call he had dreamed of. So he rushes in there, and after a bit of they chase him down to communicate with him, they tell him that his parents are actually missing. He goes into the room to check, and he finds the bloody mattress has been covered up, and the mattress is soaked in blood. And there's another finger with an address telling him where to go next, and he runs into Tony, though, outside the hospital. And Tony's demanding they go talk to the captain now. He says no, a bit of an altercation, but he ends up going off, and he gets to the room with a telescope pointed across the street, so he can get a nice viewing of Tony being eliminated now by this faceless man. A phone goes off telling him there's only a few more to go, and that he should really go home. And he rushes home, and his family is on this spinning pillar, and it's snowing in his house, and the shrink comes out of nowhere, and his family's shattered to ice, bits of ice cube. And the shrink turns out to be the engineer, who turns out to be the high priest, telling him, "You didn't go to the right place, Joseph. When I said go home, that meant go to your first home where you grew up." And he gets to it through like a hallucination kind of deal. He's following his childhood version self around, and everything shakes, and his parents age in front of him, and they attack him, and he has to fight them off, and he has to fight Daphne and Tony and the ice cream man off, until finally he gets into this dark void of a room, and the childhood version of himself is tied to a chair, and he's missing all these fingers, and the skinless Cenobite appears in front of him, and he removes the skin, and it's Joseph underneath of it, and the Joseph we're following gets shackled with the hooks, and the high priest comes out, and he pretty much tells him, "Your sins of the flesh have eaten your soul and your innocence, and this is your hell that you created," and the hooks rip him to bits. And he wakes up, and he's back on the hotel floor, And Daphne is safe, sleeping in bed, and he goes to work, happy as can be, that thinking this was all just a nightmare, until the phone goes off and it's Daphne all over again, screaming for help, sending him over the edge, and he tries to knock himself off, but he wakes up back on the hotel floor, stuck in hell, in this limbo of watching all of these people die over and over again. And that is Hellraiser Inferno. Let's go over the pros first, shall we? In the first, I think that everyone here did a really lovely job with what they're supposed to be doing. I thought Craig Sheffer, for what he's supposed to be a unlikable, morally gray cop. He's doing all these things wrong, but we see him fighting, trying to save this child. There's some problems with that. We'll talk about that later on. But for what it's worth, Craig does a really good job. So does Nicholas Tortora. It's always lovely to see Nick in the movie, TV show. I loved him in Burn Notice. But he's always just so much fun to see. And it's nice to see him here too. The Cenobite twins, played by Darlene and Maureen Sue Levins, I thought they did an excellent job as the twin Cenobites. They really went with that mixture of pleasure and pain that we haven't seen in a while. And I thought they did a great job, and it really harkened back. I thought the best this series has had since the original group in the first two movies. And it's always nice to see Clive Barker for the whole 2 minutes and 30 something seconds that we have him for. And that's a pretty good point to bounce off to the negatives here. This was a very interesting story. I really liked the idea. I know I blew it in the story part, but if you skip the story part, here's another warning for you. Spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This idea of this guy stuck in his own damnation, his own hell, and having to repeat it over and over again is a really interesting idea. You could see a lot of Jacob's Ladder and Silent Hill, especially in the corridors of the hospital, with all the modified patients and demon-looking things all around you. That was all really well done, and I think it can fit the world of Hellraiser. I just don't feel like it really clicked here. And I think one of the reasons why it doesn't feel like it clicks here is because we have no high priest in this movie, really. I was not joking about that 2 minutes and 30 some seconds long he's in this movie. That's it. That's all we get of him. And I know the director, Scott Dickerson, has said that this was always supposed to be a Hellraiser sequel, but it sure as hell does not feel like it. It really does feel like it's one of those movies where they are just cramped in there and to keep the copyright. Because it doesn't feel like it. It does not feel like a Hellraiser movie. Despite the fact that it does feel like it could be in a Hellraiser movie. I know it sounds confusing, but it's hampered by the fact that the bits of Hellraiser, High Priest and the Lament configuration are just almost an afterthought, really. And the Cenobites could easily just be regular demons. That brings us to my next big thing, and that is our main character here, Joseph. They do a whole lot of things to make Joseph a bad guy, and it's almost too much. Because in the first 10-15 minutes of this movie, you find out he's addicted to drugs. He's stealing them from crime scenes. He's stealing wallets out of dead guys. Stealing money out of dead guys' wallets. He's cheating on his wife. He's not home for his daughter. He's framing his partner, who's a really good guy. And they really just make you hate him. Despite the fact that, he might be trying to save this child, he's got all these other negatives on top of it. To where I'd much rather be following Tony around. And when it comes down to that big shock that he's dead and in hell, and this is all limboed and he's not getting out, it's not a shocking moment, it's a ha-ha relieved moment that this bastard's getting what's coming to him. And it's like Frank in the first movie, it'd be like if you're just following Frank around. And yeah, Frank gets his comeuppance, and so does this guy, but that doesn't mean that they should be the lead of the movie. It would almost have been better with Joseph if you'd have pulled back on some of this stuff, and maybe he he's obsessed with puzzles and he's obsessed with riddles. That's why he's in this hell. But his obsession causes him to, while he's at home, to open this box, and when he's at work, it's his wife who calls screaming for help, and not the sex worker Daphne. And when he gets there, his wife is, hanging from the shower, and it's his daughter that's missing, and all these fingers, and he thinks it's his daughter's fingers, when in fact not really. But it creates a little bit of sense of, um, a horror and dilemma, amps up all that suspense. To also shows that he's not a total dickbag, and that he's a good guy who's made a couple little mistakes, and he just made a horrible mistake of opening the wrong box. Because then at least you feel sorrow and grief for him by the end of the movie, and not ha ha. And it made, like I said, if you're stuck with him, he's your character. I guess you didn't want to feel bad for this guy who's in hell, but you should feel bad because it's a horror movie and all. Last little pro, the gore's alright. They didn't have a real big budget, but they did with what they could. That's me ending on a positive note here. It's not a bad movie. Like I said, the storyline is really interesting. There's an interesting idea. A lot of psychology went into it. And it could have been really good, like Jacob's Ladder sequel, or a game like Silent Hill, or a movie Silent Hill almost. But it never really feels like Hellraiser. But we'll be generous, and I'm gonna give it a C minus to end it off. And that'll be all for me, because this guy here is feeling really adventurous. So have a good day. Thank you for listening as always. Bye bye.